not possessed by a spirit?
I don't know.
To withstand it, her brain created multiple personalities. 2,500 different characters took over Jenny's body, up of a host of different people, all of whom call her body home. Many are children.
Yeah, I'm Minnie. I'm free.
In 2016, M. Night Shyamalan released Split, an American psychological horror movie that doubled as a supervillain origin story for Kevin Crumb, a man that possessed 24 separate personalities. The various personalities possessed a different physical makeup from one another. One personality, for example, had diabetes and had to take insulin, whereas the others did not, despite sharing the same physical body. The movie suggests the idea that Kevin Crumb has the uncanny ability to create other personalities that physically change him so long as he believes what is happening. This encompasses the movie's main antagonist, the 24th personality known only as the Beast. All the other personalities believe various details about the Beast, namely that he consumes flesh, has skin as thick as a rhino's hide, and is ridiculously strong. The Beast takes on several characteristics of animals he would have witnessed during the time which is implied to have been the most traumatic period of his life. To many, this was their first introduction to the disorder, Dissociative Identity Disorder, otherwise known as DID. The book-to-film adaptation of Fight Club, a story involving a man who manifests another personality as a means to deal with his dissatisfaction with his life, is another example of modern media showing this disorder. For many, this alternate personality taking on the name of Tyler Durden was not readily identified as being DID and merely presumed to be a split personality. The character of Tyler Durden, when we take a look at his book counterpart, has a strangely realistic grounding within the DID realm. Tyler and the narrator are never awake at the same time, so whenever the narrator presumes himself to be sleeping, Tyler takes over. This is emphasized to be the reason why the narrator is always tired even when he feels that he gets a decent amount of sleep. More recently, we have the release of Marvel's Moon Knight, which also features exclusively a protagonist suffering from DID who phases in and out of his various personalities. These are just a few examples, but I feel like it is important for you to understand that DID is not uncommon in media and culture, and you've probably been exposed to it multiple times before in your life. DID was formerly known as multiple personality disorder. As shown in all these mentioned films, it is the result of more than one individual mental state existing inside a body. Lately, we've seen a massive influx of individuals on media platforms such as TikTok, YouTube, or even Instagram claiming to be suffering from DID. Some often claiming to have personalities that are literally anime characters or Disney stars, or even real people that have passed away. Some of them even claiming to have alternate personalities numbering in the thousands. This is a bit strange considering that anywhere between 0.01% and 0.1% of the population are affected by DID. So what is DID, and why does it seem like so many people suddenly suffer from it, and why would anyone consider faking a serious mental illness? The initial diagnosis for DID was met with some skepticism, as borderline personality disorder and other mental illnesses like schizophrenia presented somewhat similar symptoms. Eventually, DID was concluded to be a symptom of those with a disturbed mental state, often associated with early childhood trauma or in the beginning stages of emotional development. The cause of DID is still heavily debated. There seem to be two main factors at odds: trauma models and sociocognitive models. Trauma models consider DID an evolutionary-based defense mechanism to cope with overwhelming experiences that occur during a heavily traumatizing event. Numerous studies have provided empirical evidence for a link between dissociation and psychotrauma, including severe childhood maltreatment. Sociocognitive models are a bit different. They emphasize the role of cognitive predispositions, such as suggestibility, hyperassociativity, and being prone to fantasy, and social factors, such as media influences and sleep disturbances. Even to date, the subject is still a constant back and forth with differing views from both sides. The one thing that is concrete is that DID does in fact exist, but the problem has become that DID seems to be becoming overly diagnosed, with symptoms that are a bit too similar to other mental illnesses and it becoming a bit harder to figure out what is what. Kind of like how lupus is a symptom of everything. Those suffering from DID are subjected to levels of extreme stress, anxiety, self-mutilation, anger, insomnia, and sporadic mood changes. Jennifer is the first recorded case initially thought to be possessed in Mons, France between 1584 and 1585. Despite initially believing it to be both possession and an exorcism, the accounts of Jeanne Ferret were later revisited as a doubling of the personality due to the identity fragmentation and a history of intense childhood trauma. Now, there's a pretty wealthy history here. In the dark times, if you start saying you were hearing voices in your head or that you were more than one person inside a body, naturally they'd probably toss you onto the fire very quickly, more than likely assuming you were possessed. It is hard to actually pinpoint how long mental illnesses like DID have been around due to this, but Jeanne Ferret is the very first recorded case. I'd like to redirect us to something that I feel is a bit more grounded, so as to give you what I feel like is a decent representation of what I think DID more than likely is. This, of course, is completely subjective because, well, who knows?
Personality that is emotionally stronger.
You know, if Gretchen's having a hard day, I come out and I go to class.
The documentary Multiple Personality Disorder follows Gretchen, a mother of two that claims to suffer from multiple personalities. Her day-to-day life is described as a living hell, with her possessing a personality that is prone to self-harm or even attempts at committing suicide. She is unable to hold down a job or form any meaningful relationships in her lives due to this. In this documentary, you really get the feeling that Gretchen is suffering from something, that this is an ailment that has taken over her life and tore it apart from the inside out.
Am I writing myself?
Each personality has a different handwriting.
I requested when we started this that please, when someone is out, will they please write the date, the day, and the time, and where they were, who they might have seen. If they would please give me an idea of where the body's been.
Began to clean with a vacuum. The sound caused her to panic, and she started to run. We tried to help.
That being if, again, you consider Gretchen to be truthful. Why do I say that? Well, it turns out Gretchen was treated with sodium amytal, or more commonly known as truth serum. During her more violent episodes, or whenever she was being treated with therapy, they would administer a dose of this. On the surface, it seems like it would make sense, as one of the main side effects of this drug is divulging information that the subject would normally withhold. However, this would lose almost all of its credibility upon the discovery that sodium amytal could be used to coerce a subject into creating a false memory. Which basically means that if your doctor gave you this and started talking about trauma that potentially didn't exist, you could potentially make up a fake, non-existent memory of trauma that never actually happened to you. There's a reason it isn't around anymore. Sure, it might be useful when you are a spy and trying to convince someone to take the fall for something, but otherwise it has no real use in modern society. There's no way to know if what is being told to you is the truth or just a fabrication based on what you're telling the person that is suffering. Now keep in mind that for DID, there are biological, neurological, and environmental factors that all contribute to a diagnosis. Before we delve a bit deeper into the context of this particular video, I want to ensure that you are familiar with some of these more basic terminology. As I've gone through a lot of information while making this video, there's quite a bit of terms that are a bit weird. So let's go with the basics. A system is essentially what the alternate personalities are called, seeing as they all simultaneously exist inside a single host. They usually function with duties of some sort. An alter is just another word for a personality. Sometimes personalities manifest themselves with different titles and jobs, such as gatekeepers or trauma holders. A trauma holder, which is a personality that is very often aware of what has happened to the body as a whole, but has some subconscious duty of bearing the memories independent of the rest. Protectors are personalities that often manifest to protect the body. More often than not, these personalities feel negatively towards others, viewing them as weak or unable to fend for themselves. Contrary to a trauma holder, a protector is meant to prevent further trauma from being imposed on a system. Which means, in layman's terms, if the person or system is feeling stressed in a moment, a protector comes forward and deals with the stressful thing. In Gretchen, for example, she presents a trauma personality that is fractured from her life when she was a small child, and this personality appears to be fully aware of the abuse that happened when Gretchen was younger. She also presents a fused protector trauma-type personality known simply as myself. This personality takes over whenever Gretchen is feeling stressed and feels ill will towards Gretchen for associating sexually with men and generally being weak. Gretchen also bears a very dangerous alter known as Enigma, which is a weird name, but let's just move past it. This personality is fixed on taking Gretchen's life, and that is pretty much the gist of it. Now, fronting is what happens when a personality takes over. In Split, this was described as a personality taking the light, or taking over the host body. Usually, this is the point where disassociation occurs, or at least is the most obvious. You've probably disassociated at some point in your life. The most common experience with disassociation is when you are driving home one second and the next you are pulling into your spot and you don't sort of remember getting there. Sure, it was a 30-minute drive, but for you it felt like it just poofed right by. The easiest way to describe it is an out-of-body experience, something your brain can do when it is stressed, traumatized, or just bored, really.
Guess the player.
Ooh. One person front. One person, please. Okay, we've got a Kyle and Chloe Cocon-ish.
For those suffering from DID, disassociation is often a trigger that causes a switch, or more plainly put, one personality swapping out for another. Now, there are a bunch of other terms. There's the inner world, which is an inner world that exists inside a system's mind, the host, and their inner world can be massive. It can be literal cities, and they claim that they can explore these cities and just go on adventures inside these cities. But like I said, there's too much terminology to fit into one video, and I'm not really out here to tell you what all of this stuff means. So now you understand the gist of it, or at least enough of it. There's a lot of information on this stuff, like I said, and quite a bit of lore from the more self-diagnosed side of this thing. There are other things that can happen. Personalities can fuse together, or even die, or interact with other personalities in a completely hypothetical world in the mind of the person. Now, as I said before, a very small portion of the population is actually affected by DID. But as I've also said, there are some incredible discrepancies in the overall diagnosis of DID, with many believing that it is often misdiagnosed or overdiagnosed. To put it in perspective, among the dregs of society, there's a thing called doctor shopping, or diagnosis shopping, which is when a person who is not actually afflicted by anything, but believes they are, they will go from specialist to specialist until they are given the diagnosis they want. So what does TikTok have to do with DID diagnosis or anything of the sort? Well, if you spend some time on Reddit like me, then you more than likely know that there is a large subculture on TikTok that fakes having disabilities, or more specifically, DID. You see, some of these people who are barely above the age of 15 will claim that they suffer from severe mental illnesses with no real diagnosis whatsoever. They will claim to have DID, often presenting themselves as having alters based off of pop culture icons, anime characters, deceased Minecraft YouTubers, or otherwise. Now, not every person on TikTok who claims to be suffering from DID has this strange interest in seemingly collecting the most bizarre and absurd library of alters possible. Some of them simply claim to be suffering from DID, but also claim that they are officially diagnosed by licensed professionals. Now, remember what I said in the very beginning. One of the main controversies of DID is that it is disproportionately misdiagnosed. Now, I know what your first instinct is. Well, actually, I googled it, and this article right here says that the misdiagnosis is a myth and that it is actually more likely to be undiagnosed. And I hear you. But this is where I urge people to have some form of critical thought. This article, which states a lot of these myths involving DID, references the same site where I can find these other articles that are enforcing these myths, the site of which claims all these are accredited individuals and peer-reviewed studies, but they don't take any side in any of this. So the general consensus should be that even from a peer-reviewed point of view, this field of study cannot settle on a certain answer. Some claim it is undiagnosed, some claim it is over, some claim that it is not even a valid mental illness in the first place and instead is just a conglomerate of all these other mental illnesses presenting as a weird new one, and others attribute the sudden rises in Munchausen syndrome and social media glorifying mental illness. But there are common grounds most seem to be able to agree on, namely that DID has a plethora of symptoms that can relate to several mental illnesses, and some of these people that think they are suffering from DID probably aren't. Many of those with diagnosed DID claim that it takes months or even years to reach a proper diagnosis, that even if you are viewing the briefest moments that someone with DID decides to share on TikTok, that you have no real grounds to judge the validity of their diagnosis due to the fact that you are just a person. Now, I don't think I'll argue too much on this point because I said it is pretty subjective. Either way you decide to go, there are people out there that will genuinely fake it until they make it to get the diagnosis that they want. I will say that without a shadow of a doubt, there are similarities among these people, and they are more than likely suffering from some form of mental illness. Now, do I believe that they have inner cities full of thousands of personalities, all of them different and unique from one another? No, not even a little bit, really. I also find it kind of amusing that these systems have such unique and quirky names. I'd like to imagine somewhere out there there's a guy or gal that suffers from DID and just calls themselves Jeff or something. So let's run through a couple of these systems and see what is what. I'm not going to go too deep into it, so for privacy's sake, I won't use any real names, so I will be addressing these systems by the names that they have put on TikTok, which is, public. Still, I don't think that you should degrade or harass these individuals or groups of individuals because they don't really seem to be taking criticism very well. The asylum system.
Most of the asylum system, and if you have met us, you have probably met me. My name is Onyx. I am the primary protector of the asylum system.
Hi, I'm Doe. They don't really know about me yet. I don't know if they'll see this until later, but it's a secret. Hi, I'm Nova. I am the system caretaker. Hi, I'm Reina. I like this builder. It looks like I have stickers on my face.
Thank you for asking this question because I did genuinely want to explain. No, I did not use the money from the GoFundMe to do my hair.
The Gianu system. This system has a host named Jenna who is an author, and I can't really find any source on how many alters exist, but this seems to be more of the same. On Jenna's author page, there is no mention of DID. They make videos about trauma, alters fusing, mental health awareness, this, that, and the third. They claim to have a long-lasting hint of DID due to their dreams, whereas my dreams... I actually wrote this down. Yeah. This is a dream that I had that I wrote in my phone when I woke up. Hell-faced octopus protecting loot crates, killing pilots, one gets mad, I beat up an old friend, video game cops, glitch, can't stay for long, world isn't real. Does that mean I'm an octopus or something? Their husband also has a TikTok where he posts about his life living with someone that has DID.
Okay.
Are you a guy or a girl?
A girl.
Okay. Hey, Jay.
That's about right.
The A system, again, is similar, being diagnosed at 30 when the host claimed to hear another person screaming at them in the shower. Now, the exact number of alters seems to change, but ever since they were diagnosed, they've had 27 personality appears within a year. Currently, I don't know how many they sit at, but I'm sure it's up there. We have the Enigma system, who tackles such daunting questions as, can a white alter say the N-word in a black host body?
Hell no! Come on, wait till the no. Come on!
Which... that's really the thing that I was curious about when I started this video. At this point, this is just getting a bit too complex for my taste. Here's a brief little combination of all these systems that I've found so far, and I'll kind of let you just gauge how you feel.
Put a finger down if you have 5 or more system members. Put a finger down if you have 10 or more system members. Put a finger down if you have any mythical creatures, demons, or spirits. Put a finger down if you have any animals. Put a finger down if you have any littles or mids. Put a finger down if you have any AI or computers.
Put a finger down if you have more than 5 alters in your system. Put a finger down if you have more than 2 fictives in your system.
I have to go to work.
Things that I didn't realize were DID things until I realized that they were DID things. I have always said when something happens, like an event or like a certain weather change, or I listen to a song, I'll be like, oh, this reminds me of something that never happened. Now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that probably did happen. You just weren't fronting.
Now, to briefly veer off course, let's talk about these anime or media systems that seem to exist, otherwise known as fictive.
There are two types of fictives. Both of them are valid, but there are two types of fictives. The first one is the ones that we have. We like to call them light fictives. All right, light fictives don't really have a strong connection to their source, but they still have some memories of their source. They're not really connected to the character that their source is off of. I think that's the right terminology. However, they are connected enough to where if they watch the show that their source is from, they might feel some type of emotional connection, or they might smile. You know, something like that.
So much. Because I'll get these comments that are like, thank you guys for this. I really needed to pick me up. It's been a bit of a rough day and I just really appreciate it. Bakugo.
Whereas instead of independent personalities that are conjured from the ether or split off from trauma, these people develop personalities based on the media they absorb, which they find comforting or whatever. An example of this is that one claims to have an alter based on Wednesday Addams, and not just the character in general, but specifically the one from the recent show on Netflix, and I'm sure they watched it and they enjoyed it. Which brings me to an element that I think is significantly watering down the legitimacy of DID, roleplay. When I talk about roleplay, I don't mean the stuff that mommy and daddy would do to try and save their marriage. Roleplay can also be a form of disassociation from reality or escapism. Instead of living out your boring, menial lives, instead you take to the keyboard or pen pad and write from the perspective of a character you enjoy or feel like you relate to. You put yourself in that character's shoes and behave and think as they would. Now, it seems like a lot of tweens who claim to have DID have confused role-playing with having a split personality. Maybe. That's just a theory. Now, when it comes to DID, it is hard to argue either way. Even YouTuber turned mass shooter Randy Stair appeared to be suffering from a severe break from reality and openly interacted with fictional characters he made up. He would make separate profiles and have lengthy conversations with himself, and he did genuinely believe they all existed to the point where he took his own life in order to transcend. Those that believe they have it will argue the legitimacy based on articles that are peer-reviewed, but ignore the peer-reviewed articles that argue against it. One thing is certain, and that is that I believe most of these people are suffering from mental illnesses, and the legitimacy of their claim to DID fame is a bit shaky at best. I mentioned earlier that Munchausen syndrome and how people sort of shop until they get a diagnosis they want. But I think it is also a bit unfair to categorize every person that claims to be suffering from DID as fake. We have to remember that, technically, they are legitimately crazy. The way their brain works is fundamentally different from regular people, which they have dubbed singlets, which is just stupid. There is legitimacy behind the fundamentals of DID. A severely traumatized child will develop differently than other kids. I just think it is odd that most of them tend to be asking for money, or sort of glamorizing the idea that they are multiple entities in a single body, or that they're all super okay with polyamorous relationships. They all seem to be a part of this alphabet police. It's just weird how all of these systems, or people claiming to suffer from DID, all seem to be the same denomination of person, with no real significant variation, as though a certain subculture has latched onto DID and kind of claimed it as their own since they already have mental illnesses and they can just sort of stack this one onto the pyre. I definitely think the fictive thing is not real. I'm sorry, I'm willing to entertain the existence of split personalities, but a personality based on Naruto that feels his experiences and memories, that's just not accurate. Believe it! I do believe these people suffer from anxiety, depression, manic depression, bipolar, and undoubtedly have some form of trauma. TikTok has a pretty bad stigma for people that are known to be faking disorders, and it certainly doesn't help the legitimacy of disorders or mental illnesses when every person or persons with a platform decides to immediately say that everything is valid and nothing should be questioned, and if you are questioning it, you are harassing them. The reality is everything should be questioned. Your one diagnosis is not a certainty, and if you are genuinely putting yourself on display for the internet, prepare to be ridiculed and scrutinized. Thank you guys for watching. If you're curious about these sources for DID, you can feel free to attend their upcoming meet and greet, or donate to their cause, or browse their collective selves for more information on the subject. I'll link below several peer-reviewed cases, both for and against DID, just as an example that the studies are still in progress and there's no definite article on anything. Nobody can speak to an authority on something that is so fluid like whatever the hell this is.